You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 229 with Sarah Beckman. And today we're talking about loving your neighbor in their time of need.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What is going on in your world today, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your founder and host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community. And today we are paying it forward with Sarah Beckman. And I'll tell you what, guys, the topic of today's conversation is quite frankly a little uncomfortable. It is for many anyway. You'll see why in just a minute. But before we get into our conversation today, I want to tell you guys, I really need your help. Men of Abundance need your help. So during the mid-show today, I'm going to be sharing with you exactly how it is and what Men of Abundance needs from you. It's very simple and it's going to be very rewarding for you and possibly others that you come in contact with in so many ways. So please, the first way I want you to be abundant in your life today is by simply sharing Men of Abundance with others. Sharing this episode and all other episodes that resonate with you. And if you feel somebody else needs to hear that conversation at this point in their life, be sure to be abundant in your life today by paying it forward and sharing Men of Abundance with those people that you know will get something out of this. And quite frankly, even if you don't know they'll get something out of it, because many people don't share with you where they're at in their life. And I truly do not believe in happenstance. Everything happens for a reason. Just like quite possibly you found or stumbled upon or somebody introduced you to this podcast at exactly the time in your life that you needed to hear whatever conversation you first heard on Men of Abundance. And then maybe the next one didn't resonate with you, but the next one after that and the next one after that did. So be abundant in your life today and share Men of Abundance with everyone you come in contact with. Now, in our conversation today, Sarah and I are talking about, amongst other things, caring for someone in need, caring for your neighbor in their time of need, and how to have that conversation with them. You know, like when maybe somebody passes away, something tragic happens in their life, and you just don't know what to say or if to say anything at all. That's what Sarah specializes in. That's what her book is about. And that is in part the conversation that we're going to have today. So if you've ever been in that situation, and I know for sure that I have, and there's been many times I just didn't know what to say to somebody, this conversation and the book that we're going to mention in the conversation will certainly help you in that regard. So our featured guest today, Sarah Beckman, is an author and a speaker living in Albuquerque, New Mexico with her husband of 25 years, Craig, and their 3 adult or nearly adult children. Her experience on both sides of the trials and tribulations, both being helped and helping others, provide her an authentic viewpoint for her book, alongside a practical guide to loving your neighbor in their time of trial. When Sarah's not writing or speaking, you might find her in the kitchen creating something to share with a neighbor in need. Her passion for loving her neighbor has fueled her life and ministry for more than 10 years, giving her the opportunity to address audiences across the country. She has a BA in journalism from the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and Sarah is a certified communications coach at the SCORE conference, where she relishes in continually improving her craft and teaching others to become more powerful and focused communicators. Men of Abundance, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Sarah Beckman. Sarah, welcome to Men of Abundance. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, thanks.
Awesome. Where are you at in the world?
I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico.
I love Albuquerque. Absolutely love Albuquerque, especially, is it the fall time? Like it's coming up right now when the hot air balloons start coming out?
That is right. In October, everyone gets ready. It's what we do all year is wait for the balloons, and then it's a week, and then it's over.
Listen, guys, if you've only seen that in videos and in photos and whatnot, it's nothing. Just like many other things, it is nothing like being there. It's cold in the morning. You get out there. Those hot air balloons are inflating. Get out there early before the sun even comes up. It is just the most beautiful and amazing experience. One of many that I've experienced that are just so amazing.
Yeah, you really can't put it into words. There's nothing like being here in person.
Yeah, and I'm not even talking about going up in the darn thing. I'm just talking about being on the ground and watching these things. It is surreal.
Yeah, totally agree.
Very cool. So, I like to start out with an attitude of gratitude, Sarah. What do you have to be grateful for today?
I think that today I'm really grateful for a good last weekend. Got to play golf, and we were doing some things at church, and just, I've had 4 back surgeries. So for me to be able to go out and play 18 holes of golf, I'm just really grateful.
Yeah, absolutely. Speaking of that, another experience that I just recently experienced, my oldest boy, I had all my boys here this weekend. My oldest is in the Army and lives in Georgia, and we're in Florida, so he drives down for the long weekends and whatnot. We, amongst other things, we went to Top Golf this weekend out here in Tampa and had never done that before. That is an amazing place. We had a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've heard of it. I've never been. What makes it so cool?
Well, because we're not golfers. I have golfed. I wouldn't quite say I am a golfer, but I do enjoy the game. But it's kind of like it's really, really interesting. I love the technology. It has multiple levels. This particular one, they're building one out in Hawaii, actually. I was in Hawaii for 10 years, and right in Waikiki, they're building one. And I've always been intrigued by the way they explain it. But what it is, this one is about, I think it's 4 stories, and it's basically got these ledges where you're golfing off of the edge of these 4 stories, and they're all split up into sections. You can have your meal there, you can get your drinks there, whatever. There's a little pool hall, there's a restaurant, there's a bar attached to it. But the technology is really cool because what happens is you get your own account, and when you tap your putter or your driver or whatever you're using over this little red dot that's on this machine, it spits out a ball, and that ball has a chip that's connected with the driver or the club that you're using, and you hit the ball out, and it's got these various targets out there that the ball lands in, if it does, or the distance, and you get points based off of what targets you land in and stuff. It's such a fun thing to do with everybody, and you can go out there and not know how to golf, but there's some people out there just swinging and missing, and it's just a lot of fun. It really
right, like we golf on steroids.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what it is. It's kind of like, amateur bowlers going bowling. Yeah. Now you got amateurs golfing. They can go golfing without being yelled at out on the field.
Right. You're too slow. Yeah.
I've been that guy. I've been the guy getting yelled at, and I'm like, you guys can just go through. It was like, so how would you describe yourself other than absolutely loving golf?
Well, I love family. So I'm the youngest of 14 children.
Oh my.
Yes. 1 mom, 1 dad. You're Irish, so I would say that I'm very passionate about everything I do, sometimes to a fault, very competitive. My, family really means a lot, not just, of course, my nuclear family that I am raising and loving, but my, family that I was born and raised in. And just, I believe in community. So I think that's just because my life was one big, we had our own community with 14 kids. So, and I would say that one of the things that is a double-edged sword for me is that I really like to do everything with excellence. And that can be great to a point, but then it can also be really slippery on the scale of perfectionism. And sometimes I don't want to finish something, or I think I'll never be done because I'm afraid it's not perfect. And it sort of slips into fear of failure, or what if it's not the greatest, or, but honestly, it's taken my poor husband 25 years to just keep hammering over me, like, your 80% is really good compared to most people's. Yeah, those are little things.
Wow, that sounds so familiar. You sound, in that regard, you sound so much like my wife. We were talking pre-show, we were talking about, our family, and as you were talking about just earlier with family and everything. And like you said, it's not your immediate family, but it's also the family that you're married into and whatnot. But what I get from you and what I get from your background is that also means people in your neighborhood, your neighbors, people that you come in contact with. Can you talk about that a little bit? Because we're going to get into your book here alongside, and I'm thinking that kind of relates a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think that because I moved out of state with Craig, we've moved around the Midwest. We were married and moved to Michigan, and then we lived in Wisconsin, which is where my family's from. And then we moved to Minnesota, and he has, family there, but obviously his family's not quite near the size of mine. And so our neighborhood, exactly, and our church and our schools, that became our family and our community. And it's just so interesting because I think that what we learn in life is that what we pour in, we often get back, right?
Right.
And so I was very busy pouring into my neighborhood and to my school and church and all the places. And because I know it was a luxury, even though staying at home is really hard work. I recognize that it is a luxury, that I didn't have to go get a 9-to-5 job to pay the bills. And so I volunteered for every organization too many. But in the end, that was really where I found my meaning and value outside of raising my children, was just contributing and giving back. And when you do that, you learn that those people start to become family. And then when I hit a place where we were experiencing our own hardships, what we had poured out was coming back to us tenfold. And even not what we had poured out. I mean, unexpected blessings and unexpected people I hardly knew or that I had never done anything for were loving our family, through a lot of hardship. And so it's just really, I have to create community and family wherever I go, because I haven't lived near my own family for 23 years of my 25-year marriage.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. And that's generally the case with us as well, is always living away from family and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So getting to know people in your community is extremely important. There's multiple places that I've lived throughout the years where I lived almost 2 years next to my next door neighbor, and they had kids, and I would see their kids out once in a while, but I don't think I ever talked to them once. And I'm the type of person that I like to get to know my neighbors. I like to get,
right.
I know it's kind of a weird title of a show, but there was a show with, I think it was Courtney Cox, that called Cougar Town. Yeah. And I just loved the show because they lived in this cul-de-sac, and they used to literally walk into each other's houses and stuff because they were that close. And I don't know that I necessarily want my neighbors walking up in my house, but I've kind of lived in environments like that where we're that close, we can do that. And I don't know, I just love that environment where we can all not just get along, but actually take care of each other and know each other well enough to say, what's wrong? What's going on today? What can I help with? Or just say, let me take you, give me your kids, I'm going to take them to the pool or take them to the movie, take them to the park. You go do you, for a good 3 hours or something like
right.
that. It's so important to be able to do that with each other in the neighborhood and in your family for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it makes life richer. But, whenever I've been lonely, moving somewhere new, and we've moved a fair amount, not quite as much as a military family. My husband's brother is military, Navy, and they've moved a lot. And so I don't pretend to understand how hard that is, but for our experience, we've moved a lot. And the best way to get over it is to get out there and put yourself out there and meet people. That's what I've found. I mean, you just have to invest, because you'll sit there alone and lost. And, you might think, why aren't my neighbors knocking on my door? But someone has to start, and you're in charge of your own happiness. And that's the only way. I mean, we used to tell our kids, we're trying on new friends just like you. We are quote unquote dating friends and trying to figure out if it works and if we like them and if we can keep hanging out with them. So you're not alone. You're doing it, and we're doing it also.
Yeah, absolutely. You are definitely in charge of your own happiness. And I can get some of the fears behind people wanting to meet new people. Like you just said, sometimes you're not going to like the people that you meet. And that's scary. And then you got to get into that whole confrontation of basically breaking ties with that person if it's really that unbearable. I've been in that situation before too, but this is an abundance mindset that we're talking about here, guys. So if you concern yourself too much with the people that you're not going to like before you've even met them, then you're going to always find those people. Right?
Truth.
So, if you look the other way and just say, hey, look, I'm just going to go in there being the best person that I can possibly be. And by the way, be who you actually are. But, and try to learn something. But it really does make a big difference when you get to know the people around you.
Yeah, for sure.
So before we get into your book, and I'm really intrigued with where that came from and a little bit more about this, loving your neighbor. I like to ask this kick in the gut moment, because any of us who are, have lived a couple years and do more than just sit at home, and even then you have kick in the gut moments. We all have these kick in the gut moments, and sometimes those kick in the gut moments really kind of change the trajectory of where we see our life going. So if you would, share one of those kick in the gut moments with us and really make us feel that.
Yeah, so I was training to be a communications coach. So I went for myself to this particular course, and I was, as a student, and there was some, good feedback. Oh, we think that you'd be a good trainer. So what, will you come again and start training so that you could be one of the coaches? And I was very flattered, of course. And so I went back and I was doing my week of training, and I don't know exactly what it was about the relationship between the coach that was training me and myself. And there was probably a lot of different dynamics going on, but it was not a great experience. And, there was times that we would finish class and she would turn and walk down the hall with someone else and just leave me standing there alone. There were times that I would be talking to students and afterwards I would get reprimanded, or she would correct me, or, tell me that I'm not supposed to talk to them. And mind you, I'm a rule follower. And if you've ever done Strengths Finders, are you familiar with Gallup Strength Finders?
Yes.
Yeah. So on the Strength Finders, my number 1 is communication and my number 2 is responsibility. So if you tell me what you want me to do, I will do it. Be sure that I'm not going to let you down, right? Back to that perfectionist and trying to get everything just so. But the problem was that there was no clear expectations of how the training was going to go, or what the coach was looking for from me. So at the end of the week, I had to receive my assessment. And it was the hardest thing I've ever experienced. Really. I mean, it was really hard. I on a personal, wannabe professional level, here I am, I'm quote unquote, just a stay-at-home mom. And I'm putting myself out there and I'm ready to try and be something more and step into my giftings and do this. And this person completely shredded me in my evaluation. And to the point where, I tried really hard to hold it together because I'm a strong young girl that's the youngest of 14 kids, and I've taken a lot of heat. I have 7 brothers. So I kept it together when I was with her. But the minute I walked out of that meeting, I just broke down and started to cry. And I pretty much cried for 4 hours straight. And I'm not exaggerating.
Wow. So what was the enough is enough? What came out of that?
Yeah, so I went and we happened to be sort of at a retreat center for this particular training, and I was supposed to lead the group that night. It was supposed to be my trial. And I hadn't done any of the leading up to that point. And so it was very interesting because I didn't feel like she had any confidence in me, and yet I was supposed to be in charge. So I went on a walk and I found this little chapel actually and sat there and cried. And at some point I had 3 decisions. 1, just say I'm not doing it. 2, 2 decisions, or just show up and be, very complacent and just kind of I'll be there, but you're leading, I can't lead. Or 3, just ignore it all and go in there and do what I knew how to do. And so as I made my way back up, I still didn't know my decision. And as I walked back up to the conference center for the evening, I finally really felt like I didn't come all this way to fail. I have what it takes. I've led small groups. I might not be perfect, but I know how to get through tonight. And I'm not letting someone else be in charge of this for me. Like, I'm just going to pretend they're not in the room. And that's what I did. But it took me 4 hours of sobbing and lamenting and just being so unsure of my ability. And I walked in and I just pulled it together I didn't talk to the person. I just led the group just like I knew how to do, even if it wasn't her way to do it. And ultimately, when it was over, she leaned over to me and said, "I knew you could do it," which was just kind of crazy. But in the processing afterwards, I really recognized that I have an audience of one. In my case, that is God is in charge of what I do and how I do it. And he's my boss. And I knew the gifts and talents he'd given me. And that was where I came down, was like, oh yeah, she's not my boss. She might be in this moment, but I need to just do like what you said earlier. You do you. Mm-hmm. Don't try to please another person, because you won't, first of all. So it changed. It was foundational for everything going forward from that point. And I went back again and finished my training. And, it's been a critical part of who I am.
Yeah, and that whole experience, I'm sure, absolutely added to that whole process. And it reminds me of a quote that I had heard Les Brown say many times. And I think he got this from one of his other instructors, either in school at some point. But he says, don't let someone else's opinion become your reality.
Yeah.
And it just resonates so perfectly with this situation. Sometimes our teachers in life are a little bit harder on us, and I'll use me for example, a little bit harder on me because of the potential that they see, and they're testing you at that point. And I've always kind of kept that in my head, that this is all a test. This is all part of the learning process. Now, I can't say that I've always let it just wash right off my back and didn't have a little pity party. I still have those today, as a matter of fact.
Right.
When somebody posts something on Facebook or comments on one of my posts or even sends me an email or something like that that's a little bit not what I really wanted to hear that day.
Yeah,
I have my little pity party, and then I get over it, and I call up one of my mentors, and we have a conversation, and then I have one of these conversations. These conversations lift me up so much every Tuesday and Thursday when I have these conversations for Men of Abundance. And we got to go through that, guys, but you got to bounce back from it too.
Yeah, I love that. And it is sometimes a testing. And I often find, as they say, the adversity is really where we learn. And I can go back to that moment over and over and over again and recognize that even if it was painful, even if everything she said wasn't true, I learned a lot, and it made me stronger.
So another thing I'd like for you to elaborate on a little bit, because I absolutely agree, and I love this, I just want to hear your perspective, is we are in charge of our own happiness.
Yeah. Well, I just think that so often we play the victim role in our lives, and we say, if only so-and-so would behave, or if my kids would be better, or my husband would love me the right way, or if my job would pay me what I'm worth, or give me this time off, or, we look around the world and it's often, what are other people going to do? And then when they do that thing, I'll be happy. And I learned a long time ago that people are human. The world will let you down. Just give them time. If they haven't done it already, the people you love, they're going to let you down. And so it's about how we frame things. It's about how we see our lives and who's in charge of our happiness. And in the end, I just really I've never been one to put all my happiness eggs in someone else's basket, because it just won't arrive. And, as I mentioned, I'm the youngest of 14 kids, and my dad actually was an alcoholic. And so my parents were divorced when I was 5. And my mom, a single mom, had to raise all of us, and she worked 80 hours a week. And in my very own family of 14 kids, you can see both the sort of overcomers and the victims, who are kind of have always sort of said, well, because I had a screwed up childhood, or I had this, or this happened to me. And it's just very fascinating to me that I always felt like, you know what? All right, I'm in charge. I got to figure this out.
Yeah, and that is very interesting that you bring that up. Out of 14 children, all raised exactly the same way. Different times, of course.
Yes.
14
Big,
children,
yeah.
that's a big difference.
Big decade gift
Yeah,
difference.
nonetheless, generally the same environment, generally the same, treated the same, but so many different views on life and happiness in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and different struggles for sure. I mean, the kids
Yeah, of
that
course.
were old enough to recognize how hard it was, but I never ever remember a day in my life that my parents lived under the same roof. I mean, I just don't remember it. I mean, it was 3 years in coming when they got divorced. So, there's just different struggle, right?
Yeah.
And in 1975, there were not that many friends of mine that had divorced parents, like really none. So it just was a whole different ball of wax. Whereas, maybe they experienced like, wow, I could walk home from lunch and mom could make my lunch. And wow, what would that have been like to have mom around,
Like my oldest boy, I was gone. There was 3 times that I came home from one of the deployments or something like that, and he didn't know who I was. That's how often I was gone. That was my oldest. Now my youngest, he's always known me to be around. I mean, I'm here. I ride bikes with him to school and go pick him up from school.
Right.
So it's just a completely
Yeah,
different.
they can have different lives.
He can't even imagine what Dylan went through.
Right. And that's the point, is that at the end of the day, you could always find something to compare. But, what's our litmus test? We just have to create environments in our own life where we recognize, oh, yeah, I'm in charge of that. I don't have to be around that unpleasant person. I have a choice.
Yeah.
I don't have to stay at that job. I have a choice. That's really what I think it boils down to. People say they don't have choices when they do, and it's because sometimes the choice is one that takes courage.
Yeah. And listen, guys, if you're one of those guys out there, and I'm sure there's a few that are saying, yeah, whatever, I'm in charge of my own happiness. You don't know what's going on in my life. Absolutely correct. I don't know what's going on in your life. But there's several exercises out there, and I'll do one with you real quick just right now, and you can take the time to do this. Sit down and imagine a time, or even dwell on the time that you're going through right now, and just feel the anger and the frustration, and your body literally starts shaking. And you just feel the anger of that moment, even though that moment might have been 10, 15, 20 years ago. You're going to be able to put yourself in that same state of mind by sitting and thinking of that state. Now, in contrast, go stand in front of the mirror and just smile. Just smile to the point to where you actually are laughing. It's weird. It feels weird. I get it. Or look at it. Literally watch a picture of a video of a baby laughing. I don't know who can be angry at watching a baby laughing, but that's just
right.
Extreme. But literally, you can stand in front of the mirror and just smile. Smile big. Smile to the point where you're laughing in your gut, and feel the difference in your body and your mindset and the whole bit. That little exercise right there proves to you that, or proves to yourself that you're in control of your own anger and your own happiness. Now, there's situations going on in your life. I got that. But you don't have to stay in that feeling. Elaborate on that a little bit, Sarah. What do you think about that?
Oh, no, I'm just nodding my head and making notes. I think it's great. I mean, really, it's hard. There is definitely a physical manifestation when we walk around angry, and it does, or even weighed down by problems, or I've noticed physically, because I have had, surgeries, and when I am more anxious or when I feel stressed, I can feel all those places. And people talk about when it rains, you can feel, but I think our bodies have physical manifestations. And of course, when you're laughing, endorphins are released, right? And so that does change things, So I just thought that was great. I was making notes. I love it.
It's definitely much healthier to laugh. There's been multiple case studies of cancer patients who just said, you know what, from this point on, nothing's going to upset me. I am going to make it a point to laugh. I'm going to go to comedy shows. I'm going to watch funny movies. I'm going to hang around the funniest friends I have in my life. And completely reversal and a 180-degree turn on their health. There's multiple cases of that, so laughter is definitely the better medicine than walking around being angry and pissed off all the time. So let's talk about your book. I just, alongside, I'm always intrigued by names, and I'd love to know where the name came from and where did this all come about and what's it doing for people?
Well, alongside is a practical guide for loving people in their time of trial. And Honestly, the title came from a conversation with a friend of mine who is a fellow speaker and author, and he signs all of his emails with the word alongside. And we were talking about the book because he'd written books before I wrote my first and was encouraging me. And in the process, he actually just said, because the notion is really that when people we love in hard places, whether they have cancer or someone they know has lost a loved one, or maybe someone is getting divorced, or they've lost a child, or they're struggling with infertility, or they're unemployed, whatever their hardship is, the notion is that we would want to come alongside them and love them well in the middle of it. And so as my friend and I were processing the whole premise of the book, he just said, I think you should call it Alongside. And I thought, oh no, I'd be stealing your email signature. And he's like, no, it's the perfect title. You can have it. Meaning, of course, it's a word out there in the English language. It's not like it's his to own. But it was just so sweet that I had a lot of other titles and they were longer. And this word, there's just no better way to describe it. Although sometimes people think it's a marriage book unless they read the subtitle.
Mm-hmm. Which is why subtitles are so important.
Yes, they are. But where the book was born was just, I've already alluded to it a little bit. I was on bed rest with my third child. I had 4 back surgeries in 6 years. And then 3 people really close to me died of terminal cancer within 3 years' time. And so I not only experienced hardship and had people come alongside me, but then I was coming alongside my best friend, my neighbor across the street, and my brother-in-law, or, my sister losing her husband. And so that is really where the whole notion of writing a book like this came from. And I call it my decade of hardship. Not that hardship in my life has been, reduced down to 1 decade, but that was kind of a doozy of a decade. And people started asking me what to do for their friends that had cancer or their friend that lost someone that died. And I kind of thought, well, gosh, I guess I do have some ideas around that because I've really been very intimate with it for quite some time on both sides of the bed, so to speak. And so that was sort of where the idea to write a book was born. Like, oh, I guess I know a thing or two and people want to know what to do.
Yeah, that's called the curse of knowledge.
Right.
And for those who have not heard me say that before, because I have said that before, is every one of you has information that somebody else needs. You just think it's common knowledge. And if you hold on to it, you're just quite frankly being stingy.
Yeah. And that was true because it was a big deal. And it was a very arduous process to get to the book. It was about 4.5 years from idea to when the book was on the shelves.
And who's it for?
At the end of the day, I think I hear between the lines what you're saying is that, at the end of the day, I really just had to write the book for me. Mm-hmm. And you're spot on. Because I needed to be released of the information that I had. And I also felt like I owed it to the people that I loved that I lost to kind of frame a reference guide for other people so that they could do it better. Because I saw a lot of really hard things. You hear the horror stories about people saying the wrong thing or doing the wrong thing. And I heard a lot of that. And I just really think when people are in the hardest, darkest time of their life, we don't want to make it worse. No one does. But if we had the tools and the tips and the practical strategies for how to walk alongside them in that, then maybe we could just lighten their load just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Writing a book, and I say this all the time, I learned it from somebody else. Write your story. And that doesn't mean you have to publish it. Just make it a habit of writing your story. And some people say it's journaling of some sort, and they make it just more work than what it has to be. Just take a day a week or, some time out of the weekend, whatever, and just write your story, the experiences that you've experienced, good and bad. And who knows, at some point, you may be at a point in your life where you may want to share that with other people, even with family members, for goodness sake. my wife's grandfather died at 102 just recently, and her grandmother was, I think, 96 or 97. And the stories that they have, you got to get that stuff down and write it out, at least for your family, before you forget it.
Yeah, it is really easy to forget. I attest to that.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even from starting the book to when I finished it, because I was doing my mom job in between, so I wouldn't write for 6 months because I was doing the football team mom job and pouring into my junior in high school. And, it was fits and starts. But it was definitely worth it. And I think that at the end of the day, the reason that I was compelled to continue is because I really do believe that we can do better. And I believe that people do not lack compassion. They really want to love people better in these hard places, but they really just lack the confidence. They don't know what to do or what to say. And so then that creates either a misstep or a complete lack of expression of support because they don't know what to do. So they do nothing. And then they lose friendships.
Yeah.
And that's just tragic to me. So yeah, it was written as a guidebook where you could open it and put your finger down anywhere. And this is men and women alike. I actually can't believe the response that I have gotten from the male population for this book, because when I wrote it, your publisher wants you to pick a target audience. So my target audience was women, and I'm certainly a woman and have experience in that. Write what you know. But even my own husband has just improved leaps and bounds in the area of loving people well. Like, he has a brother who had a really complex surgery and was laid up where he could only stand or be flat. And he's a doer and he's very active and he couldn't go to work and he doesn't really watch TV. And so, my husband took it upon himself to start calling him once a week, and they didn't really do that before. And he just started calling, and he started with like what problems that he was having that he could have his brother solve, because they're both mechanical engineers. So he was fixing something on the hot tub is where it started. Oh yeah, I'll call him and ask and see. And then he'd follow up, and then he was rebuilding his motorcycle, and then he would call him and tell him about it, and they would talk about things. So they found something in common, but it was like this exercise in finding a connection point to just be able to come alongside him and talk about something normal instead of the trauma that was going on in his life. And I have lots of stories from men that have called me or emailed me and said, I can't believe it. This touchy-feely stuff isn't really my jam, but your book was so practical that I just found myself being able to do so many of the things in the book to really come alongside my friend.
That is wonderful, yeah, because guys generally have to, in order for most guys to call one another, it has to be something other than feelings. You might get to that point, but chances are they're not calling for that original reason. And there's a big movement behind this, and I'm definitely a part of that, in trying to get guys to understand that women have had this figured out for many, many years, always. They just always have. Us guys don't get together that way. So what are some other good news stories coming out of the book, or even just your talks and anything else that you have going on?
Well, one of my favorites was I got an email from a gentleman who said that he had been, actually thought he was pretty good at this, but, like loving people in their hard places, but his friend was dying, and he was given my book by a different friend. And he thought, okay, well, I'm not really sure I have anything to learn, but I'll read it anyway. And he wrote me the most precious email and just said that there were so many things that he was reminded of. One of the chapters is called "It's Not About You." And it's just this powerful reminder that we have to give a lot of grace and that we have to not take offense. Like if our friend doesn't text us back or even return our call, or if they're not as appreciative as we might hope, or any of those things. Like, it's not about us. We have to really remember that. And so there were several things that he just took away from the book, that when he went and had his quote unquote last visit with his really close dear friend, he said, I just felt so much more equipped to endure that, to encounter this last end of life visit with my friend. gosh, I have another story where someone came alongside a guy who was a police officer that was on trial, and they used one of the tips in the book. And this gentleman, just responded that that was one of the most precious things of all the support that he got, was that specific gesture. There's just so many. Even a friend of ours, they lost a son to suicide, and we don't live close. And so my husband was really struggling. What do I do? And I said, I think you need to just call. And if you just call and are willing to be on the phone with them, or just, it's kind of like just showing up, but we can't just show up because we live 1,500 miles away. At that moment, we couldn't show up. And later on, that friend told me that was one of the bravest things. He said that was the people that either showed up at his door or called him were the bravest friends he had, because there was nothing they could do to fix it, but they were willing to sit in it with him.
Yeah.
And that is, that to me is worth it all. Worth all the pain, worth all the agony of, sitting myself down at a desk and writing words on a page. Like, the greatest testimony for me is if people are actually doing something because they read the book. I don't write books to make money, because you just really, if you want to make money, that's not what you should be doing. But honestly, if anyone has done something different because of what I said on a stage or wrote on the page, that is really my litmus test. It's not, oh, you're funny, or I like your stories, or that made me cry. Nope. I want to know, are you doing something different because of it? And those are my favorite. And really, we've really received a lot of amazing feedback that people did things differently. I was afraid to show up, but then I did. And my friend was like, wow, whatever. I'm grateful for all the feedback. That's not why I do it, but it really does encourage me.
Absolutely. Absolutely love that. So, Sarah, we're at the point where we're going to pay it forward to our abundant leaders. You ready to do that?
Yeah.
Excellent. Hey, guys. Men of Abundance is in deep need of your assistance, and I am prepared to give away the farm in order for you to become a contributor to Men of Abundance, so that, one, we can keep the mic on, and two, we can push Men of Abundance up through the stratosphere by getting some more systems in place that are much needed in order to take Men of Abundance where it needs to be. Now, look, when I started this podcast over 2 years ago, I started funding it myself, and I was paying for everything out of pocket, and I was extremely, and still am, extremely honored to be able to do that. But here's the thing. I have taken on a coaching business in business marketing and strategies and living a life of abundance. And this, quite frankly, is taking up much more of my time, and I'm truly enjoying doing that. I want to continue doing that. But in order for me to do that, I need to get some systems in place, and I need to get an assistant to do the editing and do some of the other behind-the-scenes stuff for Men of Abundance, so that I have more time to apply to the coaching business and to adding value to these small businesses that are making a huge impact, not only in their family, but in their communities. These small businesses are very necessary for the growth of these communities. And business owners, this is specifically going to benefit you. I would like for you to go to patreon.com/Men of Abundance, or you can simply go to the show notes of this episode and click on the Patreon link, so you can see the 3 different tiers that will allow you to become a contributor to Men of Abundance, and look at the value-packed gifts that I am personally going to be giving to you based on the tier that you decide to contribute to. I am telling you, I am giving away the farm on this, and I am adding immediate value to your business. And listen, if you personally don't own a business, then make sure you share this with all the business owners that you know, because it will greatly benefit each one of those individual business owners. Here's what you can do. You can contribute, and then I will allow you to gift that gift that you get in that tier to a business owner to make you look like the hero. Listen, not just because we are in the season of giving, but because giving is a part of being a man of abundance. And I am giving you so much value just by contributing to whichever level tier that you decide to contribute to. And I am more than happy to do so for Men of Abundance. So again, you can either go to the link in the show notes of this episode, or you can go to patreon.com/Men of Abundance. That's patreon.com/Men of Abundance. And look at the tiers and make a selection on which one you would like to contribute to. Now, let's get back to the conversation. So share 1 to 3 actionable steps that Men of Abundance can take today.
Well, I think we've touched on some of them, so I hope you don't mind if one of them is actually a review. But I think that one thing that you can do in order to, kind of be this, even just someone that's willing to spread the good news into the world, is to look around your life and really think, where could I be a blessing to somebody else? And oftentimes we wake up in the morning and we think about, what am I doing today? What's my agenda today? Our to-do list, our work jobs, our family jobs, whatever our obligations are. But if we could think outside the box and think about, what does someone in my life that's hurting need today? To have that be a first focus is really, I think, a game changer. And then to go back to what we were talking about, I think it's very important that we look at our lives and think, how can I be proactive today instead of being a victim today? How can I be in charge of my own happiness, if you will, instead of being a victim or being reactive to a situational thing that I really don't have control over? And I think that ties to the first one. If we're proactive in reaching out to love someone else or to help someone else, there's just no better way for me to change my attitude than to get out of myself and try and love someone else in my life, honestly. I mean, it's just the best way to get out of your own junk is to go walk into someone else's.
Yeah, absolutely. And hey, guys, I'm not afraid to say sometimes I might be selfish in my actions in doing something for someone else. Because if I'm in a funk and I do something for someone else, I know it's going to make me feel better every time.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about that. And if that's a selfish act, hey, I'll do those selfish acts all day, every day.
So true. So true. And I think that the third thing, they're all kind of aligned together, but if you're wondering, do I pay it forward in my life? Do I reach out and take that risk? Do I call that friend when I am not sure what to say? Or do I mow that person's grass or go offer to drop lunch at the hospital or, show up at the doorstep with a takeout dinner or, a bag of groceries or, whatever it is, if you're feeling like, I just don't know if I should, I think my last piece of advice would be, think it through to the end. What is actually the very worst thing that could happen if you did that? Because oftentimes in my life, when I'm feeling prompted or called or led to do sort of a braver thing like that, where I might be out of my box or out of my comfort zone, the thing that's most often holding me back is fear. And that's not a great way to live. We don't want to operate out of fear. We want to operate out of power and love and self-control and just like what we've been given. And in my estimation, that's just like, what has God given me? That's how I view the world. What have you given me to give back to the world? But ultimately, when you think it through to the very end, usually the very worst case scenario isn't even bad, right? So the thing that's kind of like holding us back in our mind, if we actually think it through to the end, what's the worst case? Like, would they not be my friend anymore? Well, probably not. I mean, that's probably what I'm thinking of doing isn't a friendship ender, so like, it's just not as bad as we are dreaming it up in our mind. So take the chance and think it through to the worst possible outcome. And you'll be surprised that that's really even the worst thing isn't that bad.
Yeah. I mean, even if it is a friend changer, that's probably not a friend you wanted to keep around anyway. I'm just saying.
Exactly. So the worst outcome isn't even a bad one. So what's holding us back?
Absolutely.
That's really the bottom line. Don't let fear hold you back. Get on out there and start loving people.
Exactly. So what habits make the biggest impact in your life, Sarah?
I love how you start the show with gratitude because I think the habit of really being grateful for what I have is very, very important. And for me, I'm a Bible reader, I'm a devotion reader, so that's a habit that really makes a difference in my life. And and finally, I really do make a habit of loving my neighbor. I do. I mean, I don't just write about it. And bless my husband's heart, he's my most powerful advocate and reminder. When I'm hard on myself, he's so good at reminding me. But he said to me just the other night when I was kind of bemoaning about something, he just said, Sarah, you didn't just write the book on it. You are living it every day. And that is actually the harder part. It's harder to love one person at a time and to make time in your week and in your day to sit and have coffee with a friend or encourage someone or make a meal or show up at someone's doorstep than it is to stand on a stage and speak in front of 1,000 people. It's harder to live it out each day and to enter into the mess and the mire and the muck. And so I really do. I make a habit of loving people in my sphere of influence, whether it's a stranger at the store or my actual neighbor or my family. I just really try to make a habit of loving people well.
Yeah. I would rather love somebody I don't know than hate them.
Right.
Because I don't know, chances are the person's had some of the same experiences I have or whatever, but none of that really matters. Why hate somebody you don't even know? It's just a terrible place to be.
Exactly.
What would you recommend our abundant leaders read or listen to?
Oh, gosh. So I am just finishing Everybody Always by Bob Goff. And he also wrote Love Does. Those are both really great. I also, as I mentioned earlier, I love the Strengths Finder book. That one is really a great one. And as far as on the topic of abundance, I sure loved How Full Is Your Bucket? Another great book, just talking about how when we live in the spirit of what you're lacking or what you didn't do, especially like parenting or in our jobs as bosses or coworkers, that whole notion of always focusing on what someone didn't do and how we can reverse that to be pouring in and filling someone's bucket. And it's very counterintuitive. Especially even with our kids, instead of like, why did you get that C? We really lift them up for the things they did well. That book was a game changer for me. And on my nightstand right now, I'm also reading Option B, which is by Sheryl Sandberg. And she lost her husband very suddenly. And she works at Facebook. She's very famous and pretty prominent, but it's a very interesting take on living a life of joy and resilience. And it's called Option B. And I just finished it and I'm sort of rereading it because there was a lot of great insight in there. And it's very aligned with what I am teaching with alongside. And I have a second book coming that'll be out next March. And it's called Hope in the Hard Places. So they're both really aligned. And I've just loved sort of gleaning more insights from her book.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Yeah, those all sound like amazing books. I'm definitely going to take a look at a couple of them because I love reading about stuff like that, obviously.
Yeah. They're all from a place of abundance. I think they'll be good fits for your audience, for the guys listening.
Outstanding. So what do you feel holds most people back from living a life of true abundance?
I got to go back to, I think it's fear.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's fear of failure, fear of not being good enough, fear of actually, even for myself, I felt like, what if I was good? And that was kind of a crazy one because for me, as someone who was staying home with my kids, I thought, what if I'm really good at this speaking and writing thing? And then it takes me away from my primary job. How will I balance that?
Yeah.
And that was kind of a twisted turn. And that one really set me back for a while because I thought, oh man, first of all, who am I to think I'll be good at something, right? Is the first voice I hear in my head. But second of all, if I was honest, I thought like, when I want to do something, I want to do it. I'm all out. And I couldn't imagine how could I do it halfway, which was in my mind. halfway, right? I'm either only an author speaker or I'm only a mom. Whereas really, I can do both. I just have to do it to a different degree. And I'm sure I'm not alone in this audience listening of people who want to be excellent and perfect and just do everything to the next level. And we think, oh no, like my job is more important because my paycheck matters. And then our kids are struggling and suffering because we're not spending the time we need to with them. And so just trying to find that balance was hard for me. And I believe I've got whatever balance I'm able to find right now as my nest is almost empty. It'll change, but we can do both and we should do both. Mm-hmm. So we can't let fear of either being successful or being a failure hold us back, because in the end, we just do our very best and do our part. And just like I said earlier, we have self-control. We know how to be able to make those choices, and we got to live in that instead of in fear.
Yeah, it's the self-control. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the whole idea of really having true balance. It's more of a counterbalance. Anytime you want to venture out and do other things and be great at it, some other part of your life is going to have to give a little bit for a little bit of time anyway.
Right.
And they talk about this in The One Thing with Gary Keller and Jay Papasan.
Oh, yeah.
It's the same in a career. I see so many people, I talk to so many business owners, quite frankly, that many of them truly have a fear of success. Well, what if I get too many clients? Well, what if then I got to fulfill those orders and I got to, fulfill that service and so on and so forth. And am I really up to it? It's like, well, obviously somebody saw something in you to hire you. So yeah, you have to be prepared for that. And there are a lot of people that have a fear of success.
Yeah. And I love what you said about counterbalance, because even in book writing, I definitely wasn't able to be putting dinner on the table every night and doing the laundry on time and doing my sort of normal, keeping my house running and efficient. But it was a season. It was a time. And my family was behind me and was cheering for me and happy to sacrifice those comforts and pleasures of our normal existence. And they knew it wouldn't be forever. So I really think that is a great insight, that it's a counterbalance and that there's a time when some things will take priority or precedent, but we have to be sure that we're aligned, like we're always watching for that we don't just stay on the high side of the seesaw and something sitting on the other side on the ground constantly. Right, forevermore.
Yeah. And it's important to have that conversation with your family and friends and let them know and get their support on that.
Yeah, so true. A lot of my friendships really, people, I can't be doing what we normally do when I'm in book writing mode. It's not going to happen.
Exactly. What does living a life of abundance mean to you?
Being able to choose where I want to work and how, to me right now in this season of my life, we talked about at the beginning of the show, for many years, I just was like, oh, I just want a real paycheck. I just want to go to a 9-to-5 job where I have a boss and I can do a great job and get paid and receive my value. That's been a struggle of mine. And even now, as my nest is almost empty, I have a senior in high school and the others are in college and one's about to get married and it's crazy. So the end of that era of my life, for that intensive purpose is over. And what I have realized, though, is a life of abundance for me is exactly the life I have, because I can take a week to go to a vacation with my kids, and I can, travel with my husband on a business trip. I can go to New York and watch my son play soccer for his last game. I have created my own business and my own life as such that I'm living the dream. But it comes at a price that I don't have a job where I get a huge, regular, steady paycheck. And I do have to self-start, and I do have a lot of, I have to learn so many things that I don't have a bunch of employees that do for me, or, you know what I mean? Like the life of an entrepreneur as such it's kind of lonely in many ways, but I still feel like this is my life of abundance, because if I were to trade, it's not a trade I'd be willing to make, because I love the freedom that I have. And that even if I'm not making a ton of money, I really believe that the message that I have is making a difference. And that to me is far more important.
I absolutely agree with that. And living that myself, one of the things that I do, because it does feel lonely sometimes, I'm always here with my wife and my kids, and that's amazing. But I worked for many years, and I was always going to be able to go to work and have conversations with other people. So one of the things I do now is I have a friend of mine here who I actually met. He'd been following my podcast for a while. And when I moved here to Florida, we connected. We have breakfast every Monday. And then we got to the point to where we're having breakfast physically every Monday, and then every other Monday we'll be on Zoom or something and sharing each other's, keep each other accountable to our own dreams. We're in different industries, but we just do that, and it's important to do that and get out and go to these networking events and have these conversations, but have somebody that you can get out and have business conversations with. It helps me anyway.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly right. Whether it's Facebook groups or communities that I belong to or different networking, I think you're right. It really does help to stay connected to a greater community like we talked about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So we're definitely going to have sarahbeckman.org linked up in the show notes. But before we close this up, what else would you like for our abundant leaders to know before we end our conversation today? What did we not talk about you want to ensure that they get?
I would say we covered a lot, but I really do want to make sure that the men listening or women, if they're tuning in, understand that it is a privilege to be able to walk with someone through a hard place. And we shouldn't treat it as an obligation or a box checking exercise or, because once we step out in faith and walk into someone's hard space with them, we are blessed. We do recognize even the beauty in our own lives. We're grateful for what we do have. There's so many side benefits that come from that, but it really is a privilege to be able to do so. And so whatever's holding you back, if it's, I don't know what to say or I don't know what to do, then, get the book. You'll find lots of ways. But most importantly, you probably do know a way on your own right now. And you can probably think of at least a handful of people that need something or are facing a hard thing in their life, whether it's death or cancer or divorce or, a wayward child. And I would just say, be brave and reach out because, the world needs, more love in that respect, that we would be brave enough to walk alongside our friends in their hard places.
Yeah, absolutely. I know many of us have been in that situation. I know I certainly have, and that book is going to be a huge asset to my bookshelf for sure. So
awesome.
It has been a pleasure. I absolutely love it. I love what you're doing. Go out and live your life of abundance, Sarah, and keep paying it forward because you are definitely making a huge difference.
Thanks so much. It was really fun to be on the show.
All right, guys, so I have 2 action steps for you today. One, I would like for you to go out and find somebody who you know, and I'm sure there's somebody in your life that you know is going through some hard times. At the very least, you can call them up and simply ask them, what can I do for you? Now, if you are going to do that and be very sincere about it, be prepared to do something for them and understand that you have to be honest with them and yourself on what it is that you can provide for them in their time of need. Be creative in this. Chances are you know the person you're considering contacting. So know what they like, know what they need in life, and if it's taking their kids out to the movies to give them a break or even preparing a meal for them, for their family, something like that you can do that doesn't take too much of an effort but makes a huge impact. Now, secondly, based on what I said during the mid-show message, go to patreon.com/Men of Abundance. That's patron.com/Men of Abundance. And take a look at the value and the gifts that I'm providing you in the various tiers as you decide to be a contributor and be a Patreon and contribute to Men of Abundance so that 1, we can keep the mic on, and 2, we can push Men of Abundance through the stratosphere where it belongs so that more people can find Men of Abundance and enjoy the same conversations that you are, and we can make this whole experience even better. And even if you don't contribute yourself, at the very least, pay it forward by sharing that page, by sharing Men of Abundance and sharing the Patreon page in your social media links. I greatly appreciate it, and Men of Abundance really appreciates it. Now, go out and live your life of abundance, and make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.